there is one other historical hangover we have, which is there is this perception that the enemy is terribly elusive and hard to find and hard to kill. And this is from a long time ago. In Vietnam, once it got dark, no one could see. Essentially, both sides had rifles, mortars, rockets, pretty much the same weapons. Malaya, even more so. After dark, everybody sat still and waited for it to get light. Now, Western soldiers are truly 24/7. The sky is full of unmanned aerial vehicles. Staring surveillance covers the streets of any important city. If you don't catch a guy at the task, you can track back from where he came from, or you can find where he goes to afterwards. And so the tactical task of finding and killing or capturing these guys is much harder than it was historically, or much easier than it was historically. And to some extent, our preference for the hearts and minds part might be because we're overestimating the difficulty of the combat part. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's not impossible as it used to be. I've already raised some of the problems of connection between modernisation and westernisation. There's also a difference between construction and reconstruction. And at the end of many wars, we kind of reconstruct to set the world, to set the country back on its feet. The Marshall Plan is a classic case. Reconstruction of Japan, another classic case. And the US substantially reconstructed Iraq. And that was genuine reconstruction, either replacing the damage done by war or restoring the economy to a stable footing, but it was a restoration, it was not new. In Afghanistan, though, we are modernising and we are giving them things that they really haven't had before. And so we're not reconstructing, we're constructing. And so we are injecting things into a society which it has not hitherto had. Parliamentary democracy, a non-corrupt bureaucracy, a law and order system which is robust and impartial. All these things are foreign to it. And so there is no culture of not taking bribes. There is no culture of saying, yes, you're my brother, but I'm going to treat you as I would treat anybody else. It's hard to find that culture in New South Wales. But that culture does not exist. There's a good article in the Military Review produced by the US Army in November, December called Reconstruction, a Damaging Fantasy. And a bit of a quote from it. A 2008 study by The Economist found that one of the main reasons that Afghanistan's development is proceeding so poorly is a widespread corruption, cronyism and tribalism, lack of accountability and gross mismanagement. The Economist recommended that the West lean on the President, Hamid Karzai, to introduce reforms. One cannot but wonder, how should Mr Karzai proceed? Should he call in all the ministers and ask them to cease to take bribes and stop allocating public funds to their favourites, fire them and replace them, and with whom? And if he did, what about their staffs? Many of the police, judges, jailers, customs officers and civil servants in Afghanistan regularly accept bribes and grant strong preference to the members of their family, clan and tribal group. Most are poorly trained and have no professional traditions to fall back on. How is a president, even one backed by foreign powers, to change these deeply ingrained habits and culture? To me, that's entirely true. We're expecting them to go from a condition which they have never had to one which we find acceptable in 3 or 4 years. It seems to be a stretch which Iraq found excessively hard to make and is still making and will not make, I think, for a decade or more. But to expect Afghanistan coming off a very low base to make that transition in a similar time is unrealistic. The corruption thing, Dimbasa Moyo has just written a book called Dead Aid about the impact of aid in Africa. And she makes a point that in fact continuous aid delivery, not humanitarian aid, but sustained aid delivery builds corruption, prevents the emergence of a domestic economy and prevents the arisal of entrepreneurs and export growth. And so it could be that not only is our aid not being terribly productive, but it's contributing to the problem. Law and order. The view of law and order, Western view of law and order is a rest on sound laws and impartial judiciary and a community policing approach in which police live in the community and essentially protect it against itself, which is what police do. It rests on the acceptance by the population of the authority of the state. When you're pulled over by a spotty 19-year-old policeman, you accept his authority not because of his physical presence and strength, and he's got a gun, but because he represents the strength and permanence of the state. Now, putting a community policeman in a police station in Pashtunistan and saying, you're in charge, sunshine, is not going to work. And we had exactly the same experience in East Timor, where the police service took the best of the high school graduates, trained them up for about a 12-week course, and then distributed them into police stations around the wilds of East Timor. East Timor society values age and experience, and authority comes with longevity. An 18-year-old policeman, even with 12 weeks training, is not in charge. And so the system failed because the policeman would say, don't do that, and the elder would say, go away, and the policeman would go away. In Afghanistan, it's more dangerous because the Taliban won't say go away, they'll say do what you're told or we'll kill you. And because the policeman can't fall back on the coercive authority of his state to protect him against that pressure, he will do what he's told. In Iraq, JAM owned the police service to the extent that one stage we created a law and order green zone so we could conduct trials, so the Iraqi government could conduct trials where the judges lived in a protected enclave so they couldn't be coerced, and their families lived in a protected enclave. One of the problems of the rule of law green zone that we had was it was overlooked by police headquarters, and we were concerned that the police would snipe into the rule of law green zone and take out unpopular judges. So the problem is police go home at night and live by themselves, and live with their families. When they go to work, their families are at the mercy of the man on the ground with the gun. When they go home at night, they're at the mercy of the man on the ground with a gun. Unless he's removed, the police can't work. And in Afghanistan today, we're trying to push the police forward, because that's a model that we're comfortable with, without removing the man on the ground with a gun. There are other problems with hearts, and there's lots of problems with hearts and minds. Things like Kajaki, the Kajaki Dam episode, they deliver benefits to the community in future years. They do nothing to win the war today. But by the time they start to deliver electricity or better lives, to start to convince people that it's good to be Afghanistan, and part of Afghanistan, the war could well be over. And again, in Iraq, during each of the Baghdad security plans, a succession, 2 unsuccessful, 1 successful, they started with this sweat and security effort. But what happened was that Baghdad Security Plan 3 was well in swing when the infrastructure projects from Baghdad Security Plan 1 began to come online. And so the lag between the initiation of infrastructure projects and the delivery of advances is so great that they had no impact where they were intended. And so the whole hearts and minds thing might help establish a stable and enduring peace after the war, but it can have only very marginal influence on who wins the war. And as a simple soldier, winning the war should be the first step. To some extent, our approach of economic and infrastructural largesse is pork barreling. And as pork barreling politicians around the world know, when you pork barrel, you don't buy someone's loyalty, you only rent it. And even if we do deliver infrastructure projects, even if they do make people's lives better, that does not mean that they will support us forever.